Spotlight is proudly sponsored by HEC Media, St. Louis's home for arts, education, and culture.
One of the largest 4th of July celebrations in the country.
The biggest thing for most of the guys is just trying to keep their memory alive.
And it really is a community. It's nice. We really do care about each other.
Today on Spotlight, a show full of summer fun, a popular place to explore nature, what WashU students are studying here. Plus, a copy of the Declaration of Independence lives at Washington University, why mystery surrounds this document. And then big news on one of the largest grant allocations in RAC history. But first, pickleball is a sport that's taking over St. Louis. Find out why people love to play. It's Sunday and you're watching the multiple Emmy Award-winning Spotlight.
You might say these people are friends of the court, and they're having a ball.
Anybody who comes can play, and we just have a good time.
It's called pickleball, a fast-growing sport a lot of people still know very little about, though these days it's hard to miss. Pickleball is played all over town. These folks meet several days a week at North Point Park in Baldwin.
I'd say the number of players has probably doubled or tripled since the pandemic started.
Pickleball has been around since the 1960s and is a cross between tennis, ping pong, and badminton. Nothing about the game has anything to do with pickles, but the exact origin of its goofy name is in dispute, even amongst members of the families who invented it.
There are two different stories. One is that you used to have a dog by the name of Pickles, and when the ball got away, they'd send the dog and they'd say, "Pickle ball," and he'd go get it. The wife of the guy that invented the game said that's not really true, but I like the story.
Part of the draw of pickleball is how quickly you can start playing. It's easy to learn and inexpensive to get started. An entry-level paddle costs less than a single round of golf. And in pickleball, you don't have to be a great athlete to have a great time.
If you watch the people, some of them run, some of them don't. You know, it's not a big deal.
They call me the statue because movement to me is laborious, okay? So I kind of stand still, and if I can't get it, it's a nice shot.
I'm almost 80, and I've got Parkinson's disease. And I play as much as I can, which is not very fun. But I play.
Whether it's the welcoming atmosphere or ease of play, pickleball's popularity continues to grow. Since 2014, participation in the United States has doubled. And while the sport has a reputation as a game for older people, almost 1/3 of those playing these days are under the age of 25.
I can come here. I don't need to arrange with 3 other people to play anytime. I just come here, show up, I play with here, play as long as I want, and I leave. You know, it's just completely open play. People walk by and they say, "Can you play here?" We say, "Yeah, we got an extra paddle." We have a paddle and they play.
4-0.
Pickleball seems by design to be as much a social activity as an athletic one, both on the court, where opposing players stand just 14 feet apart, and on the sidelines, where players waiting to swap in swap stories.
What happened last night? Hey, did you see the Cards last night? Hey, did you see the Blues last night? Oh, you haven't been here for 3 days. What's the problem? Oh, grandkids were in. Where'd you go? It's not just the weather.
We had 2 courts for a long time, so we'd have 8 playing and 12 sitting out, and it was a nice social time. People sat around and talked. Now we repainted this about 3 weeks ago to 4 courts. Now people complain they don't get to sit out and talk enough.
To me, it's changed my life because I did it right before COVID. And during COVID, we played out here all winter. We had gloves and hats and, we'd bring the shovels if we needed to. And it really is a community. It's nice. We really do care about each other.
Betty Vint learned just how deep that feeling goes when in August of 2021, her husband Stephen passed away after a long illness.
Pickleball helped me to relieve my stress while I was going back and forth to the hospital. The day that my husband passed, my pickleball family was right at my door the day that he passed to support me.
Some locations attract more competitive players, but the vast majority of pickleballers are just doing it for the smile. Sure, they often have to spend time explaining pickleball to people who've never heard of it, but the camaraderie they feel and the sense of community they enjoy make playing pickleball a net gain.
The people are so nice and accepting and encouraging. It's just a great way to spend the morning.
Scan the QR code on your screen to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. Johnson's Shut-ins is one of Missouri's premier swimming holes. Water cascades through billion-year-old rocks, creating chutes, pools, and waterfalls. It's a great summer getaway that's not far away.
One of everybody in Missouri's favorite places to go and recreate.
And it's not too far for Claire Mastler to study.
It's called a shut-in because where that hard resistant bedrock meets the surface, the river has to get really narrow and really steep and create these rapid formations to sort of plow through that solid rock. So we're really interested in that location because in that place it's a bedrock river, it's really energetic.
Mastler is an assistant professor of Earth and Planetary Sciences at Washington University in St. Louis.
We're interested there in understanding how those beautiful bedrock features erode and change through time. We're trying to link the different flood characteristics to what the river looks like. That work has really been led by an undergraduate researcher in my lab, Jordan Neely, and now we've started to pull in a bunch of other people from all around WashU.
H-top dash.
At Johnson's Shut-ins, they are studying flooding and bedrock river erosion. Mastler is also studying shifting rivers and changing landscapes from flooding and erosion that happens with climate change.
But that's where the experiments really come in handy, right? Because we don't have to wait around for climate change to happen.
The research team is using different tools like this flume so they can conduct experiments without risking their safety when actual flooding occurs.
We really care about when this stuff starts to move. When the gravel starts to move, you're doing the work of erosion that's changing a landscape.
In this case, the experiment is for a gravel bed river. The contents of the flume change for Johnson's Shut-ins experiments.
Instead of filling it with gravel, we can put bedrock blocks in it, and we can then have gravel bounce on top of the bedrock, and we can measure how that bedrock erodes.
Other technologies are deployed on site.
Seismometers down there that can feel the vibrations of the water as it flows through the river, so we can really get a high-resolution record of all the flooding and the erosion there. And what that allows us to do is avoid the dangerous aspects of trying to get into a river while it's flooding. We can record those vibrations of, say, that rushing water or the grains of sediment bouncing against the rock, and we can use that record instead to interrogate what's really happening during a flood.
The seismometers are strategically placed, and the data is routinely retrieved for analysis.
We have 3 different ones placed in 3 very different parts of Johnson's Shut-ins. We like to get as close to the river as possible without being in the flood zone, so I think they're about 30 feet away in 2 of the cases, and then where our rapids are, we have them a little bit further away just because of access. We actually go down and we'll do every month or 2 and download our data and then look at how the topography changes.
And they're using geospatial technologies, gathering topographic data generated by a LiDAR drone.
Go out and use unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, to take laser scans of the river before and after these floods and try and get a sense of how they're changing.
So that's the river bed, and then as we zoom out, we get the sides of the river and the trees and all that stuff. But then we can make certain different types of measurements from this.
The topographic scans, combined with repeat photos and seismic wave velocity measurements, allow researchers to measure the effects of different erosive processes at Johnson's Shut-ins. And as the work continues,
The flume is proving to be a valuable asset too.
We like to go and find places where we can go out and take measurements, but sometimes like during a flood event, it's actually really dangerous. And so we like to pair these experiments that we can really tune to look at floods of very specific sizes or different types of events, and then figure out how do we link that to what we see in reality when we go out into the field to a place like Johnson Shut-ins or other rivers around Missouri.
Welcome to the Jack C. Taylor Visitor Center.
What is this? I guess it's a sculpture, you would call it, above our heads?
When the sun is shining, different light patterns are shed onto the floor below to give a sense of being in a woodland. This is a very large video screen, and it's all managed by computer so that we can put in new little elements almost on a daily basis. The new conservatory is designed for perfect growing space for plants which we have really not been able to grow and display at the garden before. Everyone knows that the Missouri Botanical Garden is a world-class institution and has a huge reputation around the world. But we didn't have a world-class entry for it, and we do now.
Get the full tour of the new Visitor Center next Sunday here on Spotlight.
Most people, when they think about the Declaration of Independence, they think about the handwritten document that's on display in the National Archives, and they have this picture in mind. There's this painting where they're showing all of the founding fathers signing this document. That's not what happened on July 4th.
More than a year after the outbreak of the Revolutionary War, on July 4th, 1776, Congress adopted the Declaration of Independence to formally announce the creation of a new sovereign nation, the United States of America. That evening, Congress directed John Dunlap, a printer in Philadelphia, to print 200 copies.
And that was sent throughout the colonies to Great Britain, to all of the generals, to let them know that this had happened. One of these copies arrived in Rhode Island, where Solomon Southwick, who was a printer there, printed 29 more copies.
One of these copies, known as the Southwick Broadside, is on display at the Washington University Olin Library. These copies were created to squelch rumors running rampant throughout the colonies during the war.
They print them because it's a lot faster than handwriting, and it's also an official document. So these would be read in town squares by ministers or town officials. So you have somebody with an official standing reading this official document so they can say, this is what's real, this is the true news, not these rumors that you've been hearing.
The handwritten signed Declaration of Independence on display in the National Archives in Washington, D.C. wasn't created until after the broadside copies were distributed, with the earliest signatures made on August 2nd, 1776. Unlike this written version on parchment paper, the broadside copies, printed on laid paper, were not intended to last.
This is a very ephemeral document. Broadsides are printed only on one side, which is why it's called a broadside, and they were usually hung in a town square, on a church door, somewhere like that, and then tossed away. Once everybody knew the news, you didn't have to keep them anymore. So we're very lucky that some of these have survived.
How this particular copy survived is a bit of a mystery.
It survived somehow from the 18th century through 1941, where we pick up its history. We know that it had been folded at one point, so it's very possible that somebody folded it up, stuck it in an attic somewhere, and then forgot about it, or passed it down through the generations. And it was bought by the Newman family in 1941, and the Newman family very generously donated the document to us.
The document was donated to Washington University in 2015. On display alongside this historic document is a beloved collection of one of our founding fathers.
Throughout his lifetime, Thomas Jefferson built 3 libraries. The first one was lost in a fire. The second one was sold to the Library of Congress in order to pay his debts, and everybody's probably familiar with that famous line, "I cannot live without books." That had happened after he sold his collection to the Library of Congress, and he's sitting in his empty library saying, I've got to get more books again. And so that's his 3rd library that he collects. After his death, he had a lot of debt again, I think because of the book buying, so they sold that collection. Now, Joseph Coolidge had married Thomas Jefferson's granddaughter, and she convinced Joseph Coolidge to buy some of these books back from Jefferson, including one that he had given to him. So he ended up buying this book twice. Eventually, Joseph Coolidge's collection was donated to WashU in 1885. And those books actually went into the circulating collection for the most part, and they were available for circulation, for study, for students to check out and take home. And then in 2010, there was a scholar working on a biography of Ellen Coolidge who realized what had happened, that Joseph Coolidge's library had come to WashU. She called up some of the people here in special collections and said, you might want to check this out. Can you see if some of these are Thomas Jefferson's? And they were able to rescue those from the circulating collection, bring them into special collections, and identify them as Thomas Jefferson's books. Here's his signature. So instead of signing his books in the front of the book like most people did, Thomas Jefferson went to the I signature and put a T in front of it, because in the Latin alphabet there is no J.
To learn more, visit library.wustl.edu.
This story brought to you by Educate.today.
We've got some funny ideas when it comes to Benjamin Franklin.
A penny saved is a penny earned.
The Franklin we know best was wise, inventive, and old. But what about Ben Franklin, the teenager?
He seems to have been about 5'10" or 5'11" inches tall, which means that he was probably about 4 or 5 inches taller than the average at the time. And he was strong. We know he was a very keen swimmer. There are some references to the fact that he had boxed when he was a young man.
Sure, he would go on to invent things like bifocals and swim fins, and shock the world with his discoveries about electricity. But Ben Franklin was also impressive as a young man. Was he a likable person?
He had enormous presence. I think when Franklin came into the room, he was the kind of person everybody would notice. And as soon as you started to hear him talk about the things he knew about, which was a great deal, you would soon see just what a powerful intellect he had.
You see, the smart tube reaches the bottom.
Now we can all learn something about the man we think we know, thanks to a book about the young man we hardly know, young Benjamin Franklin, The Birth of Ingenuity. Do you think he had an exceptional mind and exceptional intellect, or was he just somebody who just really applied himself?
Oh, he was definitely exceptional. In fact, he becomes more exceptional the more you study him. What Franklin had a great knack for was that not only could he do the physical work of experimentation, he was a very good observer, and also very good at designing apparatus, but he also was very, very good at logically analyzing what he saw. He had a very rigorous, very methodical brain, and so he was able to take confused results and come up with a very simple, elegant hypothesis for explaining them.
Interested in learning more this summer about our nation's founding? Go to Educate.today and use the keyword American Revolution.
Today we are at Central Print in the city of St. Louis, Old North neighborhood, celebrating the award of our 2023 grants to Artists and Arts Organization. This year is particularly special because we awarded over $4 million in grants. 2 years ago, many of our grantees either didn't receive grants at all or had to accept lower payments because of the impact of COVID, both socially and economically on RAC. And so here we fast forward 3 years later, this is one of the largest grant awards that we've distributed in RAC's history. I am so proud of the artists and arts organizations that are receiving grants today. We have every artistic discipline, from poets, writers, performing artists, visual artists, singers. Every discipline of art is being awarded today in arts organizations. We have organizations that are supporting our young people, expressing their creativity, to helping adults express their creativity through printmaking. So every artistic discipline and creative output that you can think of, we are supporting today.
I'm Marie Oberkirsch, the director of Central Print. We applied for a program support grant, which helps us for our printmaking programs to provide them free of charge. We do programs here in the shop in Old North St. Louis, but we also do outreach. We go to different gardens and farms so that we can be right there in with the public, making books and prints and having a great time sharing the power of printmaking. It seems like they've been able to support a lot more artists this year, as well as nonprofits organizations. So I can't wait to collaborate with some of those other organizations so that we can all rise and uplift the arts in St. Louis together.
RAC has helped me as an independent artist because it sort of exposed me to the power of art. So going back to the Community Arts Training Institute, one of the basic principles is understanding how arts and community organization kind of go hand in hand. So we learned how to essentially build community using art in our creative practice. So that was one aspect that really helped me. And I think RAC is tremendously valuable in that way because they give us sort of a different perspective, a less restrictive, a more organic, a more natural perspective on how to connect with people.
We've built a new website so that both the residents of St. Louis and visitors to St. Louis can know all of the great things that are happening in our creative community.
War field musicians, later on Spotlight.
America's Birthday Parade started in 1878 as the Veil Prophet Parade, so it's been around quite a while, but we are one of the largest 4th of July celebrations in the country. Floats have always been part of the parade. The parade used to be at nighttime, and they used to have a unit called the flambeau unit that would walk around the floats with candles and flames on large sticks to illuminate the floats. All in all, we run approximately 21 floats in the parade, separated by marching bands. We have a lot of satellite units like trains and spaceships, and then of course everyone loves the giant inflatable balloons that are in the parade. Every year, probably 2 to 3 floats get completely remodeled, and the other ones just get retweaked with new props. Slight things get changed around. Some of them are classic floats, such as the showboat, the pirate ship. Those usually just get freshened up every year, but you know, you just don't want to change them. They're just perfect the way they are. When we start a float from scratch, first we have to have a theme, an idea. Is there going to be entertainment on the float? What type of entertainment? Is it a band? Is it a unicycle troupe? Different types of entertainment will have different needs. We have a very small team of people here. We have one carpenter, one sculptor, one painter, and then a shoestring group of guys pulling it all together.
I am the organizing volunteer who brings together the 30 or so committees that all contribute to make America's Birthday Parade a parade. It entails meetings that go for about 7 months of the year, planning that goes on for about 12 months of the year, to design floats, to develop a theme for each one of the parades, and then to go out and not only attract sponsors, but also attract elements from marching bands to car clubs to other unique and fun parade-like units. While we're celebrating our nation's birthday and we're celebrating our independence and all of those themes that make us uniquely American, we're also talking about our own past, our own experiences, things that are different for everybody, but on the whole kind of bring us all together.
HEC Media. Recognized, celebrated, honored time and again for excellence in the industry. Find all of the award-winning content at hecmedia.org.
My name is Zach Harden, and we're the Alton Jaeger Guard. We're based in Alton, Illinois. We represent Company A of the 9th Illinois. They were called the Alton Jaeger Guard. They were German and Swiss immigrants. In '61, Abraham Lincoln requested 75,000 volunteers, and the Jaegers immediately left Alton. They went to Springfield. They were one of the first companies that was mustered into the Union Army, and the Jaegers during the war were famous among the units in the West, so it was kind of a no-brainer on who to represent. Alton's got so much history. Everybody around Alton knows that there was stuff that happened in the Civil War. Everybody knows about Elijah P. Lovejoy, but this isn't something that people really knew about. And we just thought that it was a good opportunity, more or less, to kind of address Civil War in Alton. I've always liked history, but Civil War really was interesting to me because of how they organized units based on where guys were from. So it's really neat to be able to look back at a specific unit, for example, and know that they would have walked on the same brick street, that I'm walking on. The Memorial Day Parade was actually started in 1868 by Civil War veterans. The purpose of it initially, they wanted to lay flowers at what's now the National Cemetery, and then they walked all the way up to the cemetery we're at now and laid flowers here. So when we decided that we were going to do the parade, we knew we had to lay flowers. The parade is kind of the biggest thing that we look forward to every year. We essentially live the life for a weekend. We do some reenactments, but we prefer to do living histories through the National Park Service. With reenactments, that's typically what you think of when you've got a bunch of guys on either side and they kind of shoot at each other. Living histories is more where you get a smaller group and you'll focus on one specific thing or one place. We go out, we camp, the public comes out, we talk to them, we teach them about the uniforms, the equipment, a little bit of the history of the battle, a lot of the personal stuff with the soldiers. I think that's probably the main draw for a lot of guys. So during the Civil War, each company of 100 men would have been assigned 2 musicians. They wanted it to be a fifer and a drummer. Their purpose was a strictly military purpose. Based on the beat that they would play, it would tell the soldiers what commands meant so that units on the battlefield could hear, because when you have cannons and gunfire, believe it or not, you can hear a fife. So you would hear the fifers would play an order, and then the troops would move based on that order. And then typically on the march, they would put all of the musicians together to make a makeshift band, and they called it field music. And then they would play songs while on the march.
Some reenactors they'll go to an event, they'll have just their battle reenactment and other things. They don't usually do too much for like the actual camp life of what soldiers is. The good thing about the Jaegers and a lot of the campaigners is they actually utilize us as field musicians to be their alarm clock. They have us play reveille in the morning to get them up. We play tattoo at the end of the day to put them to bed. We play lunch, practice and dinner call, and we'll play assembly and other things like that. But a lot of people don't get to see in modern reenactments is how soldiers' lives were controlled by the field music. We are their alarm clock, and we tell them when to do everything with music.
I remember the first year we did the parade, we had a lot of shocked faces. I mean, nobody had seen anything like that, and that was great. But what was even more great was today when we're marching and we're hearing people say, "Hey, it's the Alton Jaegers," and I mean, we heard it all along the route. We get great support. The first year we did this, we wanted to lay flowers at the National Cemetery on the graves of the Civil War soldiers. As soon as we finish the parade every year, we go down there, we lay about 300 flowers. I think honestly that's probably the biggest thing for most of the guys is just trying to kind of keep this alive, keep their memory alive. It's Memorial Day. Marching in a parade and talking about guys that went through stuff we can't imagine, it seems kind of like the least we can do.
Next week, a special edition of Spotlight that takes you on a behind-the-scenes tour of the all-new Jack C. Taylor Visitor Center at the Missouri Botanical Garden. Thanks for watching Spotlight. Join us next Sunday at 9:30 a.m. on KPLR 11.